welcome to Scrappin with Sheri. We are looking at page 84 in our sketchbook, and believe it or not, I have finished my album that includes Michigan and Ohio, the trip that we took in May of 2024. And I looked at this page initially for something else, but I decided it would make a really great title page to start that album, which unfortunately has evolved into 3 albums, and you'll see that in a flip through coming up very soon. But I wanted to make this the title page. Now, I only have a few photos to go on the front of this page, and you'll see we're back to lots of circles again. I am not doing any circles for my photos, but I had a postcard that we bought of Ohio, and then one of Michigan, and then our picture when we actually went into Michigan at the first Welcome Center, because that was the first time that I had been to Michigan. So I only have 3 photos. I felt like this would be a great page for this. Now I'm pulling bits and pieces. This piece of paper is from the Seaside collection, as is the stripe that I'm sure you've recognized from some of my other pages. This page, I liked the blues on it. I like the way that they go along with these blues. This is from Full of Wonder. This is one of our newer paper packs, but I just love this particular blue, so I'm going to use it as well. And what I'm basically going to do is start at the top and do these couple of little stripes, and then I'm going to start at the bottom and move my way up. Now you'll see I'm not going to follow this sketch exactly in one major way, and I'll show you that in just a minute. But I picked this to make one of these stripes up here because I felt like that's a great contrast. And I'm just going to pull out my 12-inch trimmer. Now these strips are very, very thin. They're only 1/4 inch strips. And if you are cutting on your cut line, the 1/4 inch is right at the edge of the gray mat. So I'm just going to slide to the edge of that gray mat. Now again, this is going to be a really thin cut. Not much to it. And I'm going to use that for one of them, and I'm going to use this stripe right here for one of them. And you're going to see these 2 pieces of paper come back into play a lot on this particular page. Now I'm going to go ahead and stick those, just because in cutting all these little bits and pieces, if I don't stick along the way, I'm afraid I'm going to get things lost. So I'm going to pull out that silicone mat, and I'm just going to leave it here because we're going to use it several times on this page. And I'm going to put this striped one at the top because I want this sand colored one to kind of act as a barrier between the stripe and the page below. How do you go about doing your title pages for your books? In mine, I typically do the whole album, and then I go back and do the title page, unless something has just jumped out at me from the beginning. But I tend to leave the title pages until last. Sometimes I use leftover photos. Sometimes I have bought postcards, particularly on travel books. But you'll see how my title pages evolved in this particular album when I do the flip through. So we've got that part. Now let's start at the bottom and work our way back up. Now the bottom has a 1/4 inch strip, and I'm going to go back with this sand colored paper. That's going to be the bottom 1/4 inch. But I'm going to do something a little bit different. This calls for 1-inch squares, which are easy enough to make. I just didn't really want all those squares there. And I'm at a point that I'm trying to use up some of these paper collections. So I felt like using these stripes would kind of make this look without having to cut all those little squares. Now because those are 1-inch squares, I'm going to cut this as a 1-inch border. This gives me several colors, but I don't have to adhere all those little squares. And then there's another 1/4 inch border above that. So I'm going to go back and cut that with my sandpaper. Lots of little pieces on here. And let's stick those down before we move on. So what we're getting is this 1/4 inch border right along the bottom. Instead of the 1-inch squares, I'm doing my stripe again. And then another 1/4 inch strip. So it's just kind of back and forth with this one. And you could cut all these pieces first. I just worry on this little workspace where I'm working right now that I would lose pieces if I started cutting all those little strips and didn't stick them down. I do like the way the stripes give me a lot of different colors to play off of. And I don't know if you glimpsed it in the beginning, but the postcard that we got from Michigan has lots of color in it. And I feel like these pick up the color and the feel of the album. Going back to these nautical packs, and I'm using a lot of scrap pieces at this point because I just want to finish up some of these collections. All right, so our next layer in here actually has a background. It has a 1 3/4 inch background with a bunch of little circles on it. So I need to cut a piece of white paper at a 1 3/4 inch. Now, why would I choose to go with white on that? I think it's just going to make a really great contrast to the circles that we're going to put there. Now, you could put them directly on this piece of paper, but I just think it's going to make a nice look to have the contrast. So I've got my 1 3/4 strip. And we're going to add our little circles to this. Now, if you'll notice on here, some of the circles are cut off. They're kind of haphazard here, there, and everywhere. So I'm just going to stick these. And again, I used lots of scraps on this. I used my 1 3/4 inch circle punch and just punched a bunch of scraps to see what I would end up with. Because those two are the same, I'm going to try to get those pretty far away from each other. Maybe not all the way to the end. And I used different pieces from different packs, but I tried to pull colors that were very complementary. I'm going to kind of get those blues a little further away from each other. This was from the new Coastal collection. I think this is so pretty. And I wanted to include one of these ships because we did take several little boat rides on this trip, so that was fun. And I'm looking at my spacing. Obviously, I'm going to have to move some things around a little bit. And it might be easier, because I've not practiced this, it might be easier to work down one side and then back up the other, but, you know, that's not what I did. Because if you look, they kind of fit in between each other on the sketch idea. Some are a little higher, some are a little lower. Let's cut these off and see how we can use these that we've already stuck, and use the bottom sides of those a little bit so we don't have to make quite as many circles. And I wasn't really looking at how many. I was just cutting for fun. That's one of the best things about making this 1 3/4 border too, is the fact that you can put all your circles on it and cut off those edges very easily. If I were sticking this directly onto my paper, it would be a lot harder to work with that. All right, so let's do some spacing here. That's a good one for that. I am still using my repositionable tape because I felt like this would be one of those that I might have to move some things around. And I'm still going to have to move some things around, but it's all right. So as I do this, I'm being mindful of where things are going, that things are not too matchy-matchy here and there. That seems a little bit close, but it's probably going to work. I probably want to take this one further down here a little bit. I am trying to leave some pretty decent space in the middle. Not tons of it, but that's a little more space than I like. But when I look at the example, they also have a little more space on some of theirs. So, hey, as long as I'm almost doing it like the design, it's all right, right? And I'm going to need some contrast over here. Let's see what we can do about that. Here again, we'll just chop these partial ones off and see if we can use them. We might be at a point that we have to bring in maybe one more pattern just to get them all done. I don't know if you can see it on the video or not, but boy, my cutting mat is starting to look really bad. And I'm about to the point I need to switch. I'm on the number 2, so I can still switch to 3 and 4 before this mat is done. Now here, I can't use that one there because it's the same thing. I could use the wood grain again. And because I just use repositionable tape, I can rub that off pretty easily. Now, something else that we could use one more of would probably be that little one. But again, my spacing is not good there. I think I'm going to have to bring this one up and over so I can scoop this one over. And then we should be able to fit that little blue one right in there. Okay, that's not bad. And I do like all the different colors in there. So I just need to cut off that one more piece. I think this particular page idea would make a really good double spread. You could carry this design across both pages. Or you could turn your sketch and do it down the side of the pages, which I think would be really pretty as well. So let's stick that on. And that was probably the most time-consuming part of this whole thing. Now, if you choose to do all those little squares, that's going to take you some time as well. So just be aware of that. And, you know, I'm noticing some of my little circles are going over the edge a little bit. So rather than trying to cut it again, I'm just going to make that border go right over the edge of those. All right, so let's see. We need one more of these little borders. Actually, we're going to need 2 more. And another stripe in the middle. Again, those are 1-inch squares. So we need 2 more of these little 1/4-inch borders. And 1 more of this 1-inch. Now this would be the 1-inch squares if you choose to do the squares. So let's do our little 1/4-inch border above our circle border. This is a pretty heavily bordered page, don't you think? So I felt like it would make a good title page. Lots of visual interest right off the bat. So as soon as I open this album, I'm seeing all these colors and designs. And then I've used so many of them throughout the album. There'll be some continuity when we see them again on different pages. And my stripe, which would be your 1-inch squares if you're following the sketch exactly. This is another page where it's a great way to use up so many scraps from a collection. In fact, I was just thinking I had pulled several collections where I have bits and pieces left over. This would be a great way to use up some of those collections and make some pages. So we've got all those borders done all the way up to there. Now it shows a title here. I'm not sure yet what I'm going to do about that, but let's grab the pictures and see about getting those on here. That fits almost exactly. We actually went through Ohio first. So if I wanted to keep it in order, I would probably need to do Ohio, then Michigan, and then this picture. Now because my postcards are a little bit large, I'm going to end up covering up something if I do all of these things. And I'm kind of back and forth, but I do like the fact that we had a picture at the Michigan Welcome Center. If I cover here, I'm going to cover those little buoys, which I really liked. All right, I think that's the way I'm going to go. I'm not covering up everything down here. I'm keeping some design. I like that. That's how we're going to go with this one. I'm going to use my regular tape for this, just because these are photos, postcards. They're a little bit heavier. The repositionable tape is good, but I just feel like this one is much stronger. I did map my postcards. This one actually was a lot longer as well, and I cut it down just to make my scrap paper I was using to map fit. Had I looked at the layout ahead of time, I might have left that full size, so these would be the same size, but I'm all right with that. That doesn't bother me that there's some variation in size there. In fact, I think I kind of like it. And when I'm looking at the space on the sketch where it shows title and title, I think that would be a great place for me to put the dates of our trips. And I'll probably do that using my label maker. But look, y'all, there's page 84. It's done. Wasn't our quickest page ever, but I think it's really pretty and there's a lot to it. So I like this one. I will be doing this one again. And page 84 is finished in your sketchbook. So until I see you next time, happy scrapping.